Hey there YouTube, welcome back to Artichoke Dip. My name is Rob, solo tabletop gamer. I enjoy solo tabletop RPG games and board games. And well, it's a brand new year, 2019. Happy New Year to all of you guys out there. So I figured what a better way to start out the new year than with a brand new video. And before I get this started, I've got a couple disclaimers got to get out of the way here. First and foremost, everything you see, everything I talk about in my videos is my own hard-earned money. I'm very passionate about gaming and I love tabletop gaming. So nobody's endorsing me to tell you that a particular game is better than the other. These are just game systems that I found that I enjoy and I like to present to you guys to give you guys some, at that point, ideas or to use for your tabletop, or perhaps maybe there's some books out there that you never knew even existed to help you with that. And that's the whole point of my channel. A second disclaimer I want to get into and talk about is if you like my video, click the like button. And if you have not subscribed, please subscribe, click the bell icon, and every time I upload a new video, you're going to be notified about it. So let's jump into the video. And the first thing that I'm doing, and I guess I should explain myself, and so I spend a lot of time and effort into the channel and enjoying my gaming as well, and so I have this balance of time that I have to at this point balance a full-time job, being at that point husband and father, enjoy my tabletop gaming, at that point reviewing some new game systems, figuring out how at that point I use them, and then conveying them to you, how they could work for you on your game table. At that point, trying to read through, answer comments, questions, and engage into a Facebook page. Sometimes it can all become very overwhelming and I'll lack in one department or the other. But of course it's just me, running around doing all these things and trying to keep everything going, so that's going to happen. But I wanted to give a special shout out to some of my subscribers here and the great comments that they have left. One of them is Christopher Weaver here, so let's read his comment. Hey Rob, just wanted to say I'm really grateful for this video series and all your videos in general. For a while, I had always wanted to solo RPG, but could never get the balance between player and DM in my head. But after watching your videos and some others around YouTube, such as Chits and Cat, Geek Gamers, I have come up with my own method for solo gaming and it provides endless entertainment. Like you, I am restricted in my gaming as I work long hours and have a lot of responsibilities. I do manage to play a weekly D&D 5th edition game, but I still leave that game sort of unsatisfied and longing for more. And this is where solo GMing has helped me out a lot. Not only do I have fun, but it forces my imagination to go places I never would have gone before. I have created an entire world in my head and I have just as many surprises and misturns as you would expect in a game group. Also, I have found many books thanks to your recommendations. So keep up the great work and love the passion, bro. Peace, smiley face. Alright, thank you so much, Christopher, and that's the reason why I started the channel. When I had started it, I didn't know how it was at that point going to be, I don't want to use the word perceived, but I will, out there on the internet, and how many people would actually engage with it. And to my surprise, quite a few, and I am so grateful to have you guys. So you're very welcome, Christopher. Thanks for subscribing to the channel, and I'm looking forward to hearing more great comments from you. So another comment that I went through here and I was looking at and is this one from Pierre Pau. And he writes, I'm not a solo player at all. yet. Don't really know why, but I feel a magnetic attraction to Tunnels and Trolls. Have played a couple of times with adults and with kids, but it felt too repetitive. Maybe it was my fault, but some stunts here and there made the games enjoyable. I feel that the most awful tension disruptive mechanic is the each time less and less chance the loser of a combat round has to actually kill their enemies. I would like to hear from more experienced players how to overcome that. Well, Pierre, here's the thing about solo RPG. So when it comes to solo RPG, what you put into it is what you're going to get out. So if you put a minimal effort in, you will get minimum back out of it. As far as encounters go, in with particularly Tunnels and Trolls, and I understand kind of where you're coming from there as the way that the mechanic works. That's where I personally enjoy a more turn-based combat system like Ruin Quest or Palladium or Dungeons and Dragons, because at that point it's more epic, if I can use that word for that, into where each character at that point has a particular set of skills or weapons, or at that point abilities that they can use bonuses to give them the upper hand in the combat round. Whereas with Tunnels and Trolls, at that point you're taking the group as a whole against the other one, and at that point adding the numbers, subtracting, and whoever comes out on the top wins that round of combat. Now, for some solo players, they enjoy this kind of combat because it's relatively quick, keeps everything moving at a rate that they like. Well, Pierre, what I can tell you there is the first thing with a solo RPG is you have to find one that you really enjoy and that captivates your imagination. Tunnels and Trolls is a great game, and I'm not going to knock Tunnels and Trolls. I own Tunnels and Trolls, but is it a game that I play a lot? No, absolutely not. I gravitate more towards Ruin Quest and Palladium and D&D, Castles and Crusades, to name a few, because I really like how the game mechanics work, and it really captivates my imagination, and, like I said, gives me a more detailed narrative of combat. So, I hope that answers your question, Pierre. And let's kind of move on here and see what else we have. So, here's one from Steve Thomas. I'm going to give a shout out to. My issue is that I'll start a new RPG, Dungeon World for example, then I'll read through and get to character creation, and I'd be ready to start a game, then a new RPG will show up in my mailbox, which is my fault for having an RPG obsession. Well, Steve, I have to agree with you there, and the boss agrees, the boss being my wife. We have just had a very lengthy conversation the other night about how much money I've spent this year on gaming. So I get bogged down in so many different RPGs and rule sets that I get them confused. Laugh out loud. I just need to stay focused on one. It's very true. One thing you could try, Steve, that might help you out is, like particularly what I like to do with my loose leaf folders, is I'll create a RPG. At that point, I'm going to play a few sessions. Now, I'm going to get to a point to where I may either feel frustrated or I may feel that the storyline isn't at that point progressing maybe quite the way that I want it to. So at that point, I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to grab another one and play that one. Now, of course, I do break that up with board games too, because there's times that I want to play a game, but I don't really want to play an RPG. I don't want to invest that amount of time into it. I might want to have an hour or maybe two at the most to sit down and play a game. And that's where some of the solo board games I talked about here really do help with that and help break things up. Hope this helps, Steve. And, well, I can only tell you one thing about your RPG obsession. Welcome to the club. So, I love hearing from you guys, and this is awesome. And I know I have kind of, well, how do I put this? Lacked in the department of the comments, and I really do apologize for that. And I have just been, at this point, had a lot of things going on, particularly with the holidays here, and as you guys know, things tend to get a little crazy around those time of year, and it didn't help for the fact that I have received Massive Darkness, and I got that board game, and that consumed me for almost a week, to where I was just, at that point, 100% into Massive Darkness and enjoying that game system. But I have moved on since then, and I have to admit, my newest RPG I started that was actually in the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms, not Forgotten Realms, but Ravenloft campaign setting, turned out pretty good. So, I have a question moving on here, and as far as New Year's goes, so typically in New Year's we all make a resolution, whether it's to stop doing a bad habit or perhaps it's to start adapting to a better habit to improve our health or our lifestyle or wealth or whatever have you. The point I'm getting at is I never really took New Year's resolutions really all that serious, and, well, never really thought of taking on a New Year's resolution. Mainly because I'd see so many people take on a New Year's resolution, only a couple of weeks later to find themselves saying, yeah, well, I gave up, better luck next year. So this year I decided to take on a resolution for myself. And I decided to, at that point, start writing a solo guide. Now, whether this is going to come to fruition and be published, or if it's just basically going to be a project that I take on and at that point utilize for myself solo RPG, well, it's going to be a ways out either way, because it's going to be quite a project and an undertaking to accomplish. But in doing this, I figured something out. It's one thing for me to sit here and make a video, talk to you, and explain something, my thoughts, my feelings, and just using my words. It's quite a different thing at that point to be able to do the same thing, but write out words, articulating them, so the reader at that point can read it, understand what I am trying to say, or be able to conjure an image in their mind of what I'm imagining and trying to convey to them. So I had started my book, and I spent a good 2 days sitting down, writing, and I came up with several drafts until I threw them out, new ones, threw them out, until I came down with a couple of them that I really liked, edited them, and started, at that point, making a book for myself, or maybe to be published. I guess we're going to see how this all works out. As you can see, I've been pretty busy and pretty happy with what I have so far. And anyways, I just wanted to show that off, and where I'm going with this is a section I'm working on as I was writing it up, and I don't even know where these words came from. And it's just like they jumped out of nowhere. And when I sat down and I was editing this and I read it, it really at that point questioned my solo RPG and gave me a really, really good question to ask myself, which I'll ask you guys, and I look forward to hearing your comments on it, about character background. Now, I'm just going to read a brief little bit of what I have written here, and that is, having a creative background story for your character can add depth to the character and how they are connected to the storyline, which you already know that. Ask yourself this, and here is the question. Do you see your world evolving around your character, or do you see your character as part of your world? I'm going to ask you that question again. Do you see your world evolving around your character, or do you see your character as part of your world? Now, if your world evolves around your character, then when the character dies, so does the world. If the character is part of the world, the character may die, but the world remains to create another character or have a character companion or companions avenge their death, which at that point can add even more storylines, more depth to your world. Anyways, I'm not going to read any further than that. I'm keeping this real close to the chest, and I came across that, and I thought that would be a very unique question to ask you guys out there, and for you to actually think about that and let me know, how do you see your characters? At that point, does the world revolve around them, or do you see them just as part of the world in which you have created? So, as I said, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts on that one. So, I'm going to talk about a book here. I've had this for a couple of weeks now, and I'm taking some time reviewing it, and to my surprise, it's a very solid system. I am excited to talk about it, and for you solo enthusiasts, I think if you do not already have this in your library, you may want to look into getting it. And of course, I'll put a link to the book as well in the comments below. This book is Scarlet Heroes. Now, I had picked this book up, and one of the ways that I look for new books and stuff is I will just put in a keyword search of solo tabletop RPG to see what comes up. And this is one of them that came up in the hits. And I had found it on Amazon and purchased it. And one of the... I'm glad that I did do that. One of the things I know about a lot of role-playing game systems, and maybe you guys are running into the same problem that I had before I get into talking about this book, is I know in my area, game shops have been shutting down, going out of business. And you could kind of see the trend happening because at that point their shelves were getting more and more bare, less and less people, you know how that goes. And when you order something offline, you kind of don't know what you're getting into, and sometimes you get a system and you sit down and you're excited about it, only to find out it's basically already a system like you already have. And so at that point, you're kind of left with an identical system, different art, and maybe a different explanation on the rules, but to a certain extent, they all play the same. And I think maybe a couple of you out there ran into it. I know I have ran into that a couple of times. So when I ordered this book, I was a little hesitant at first. I wasn't sure. I'm like, am I just getting into another game system that I already have? But ultimately, I did order it, and I'm glad I did. Holy cow. So if you enjoy old school games, old school revival games, you will definitely love this system. But I'm going to get into some of the major differences of this system compared to old school revival games or classic D&D if you have the original sets and still play those. Even I'm going to go as far as into the more modern editions of D&D and some of the similarities. Similar, but not. The first thing I want to do is talk about the back of the book, which, my gosh, I have to tell you, the last few game sessions that I have had, believe it or not, I have shelved Mythic and used this entirely. And, oh man, it is such a good system, and what you get for your money is awesome. Just awesome. So in the back of the book, it has an entire section for you to read about solo gaming, how they suggest you solo game, and running adventures after the adventure, using your imagination and the oracles. And they break it up into 3 different kinds of adventures you can do as well. I'm going to jump straight into the oracles and the tables and explain to you what this book contains and what it really adds into your game. And for some of you that may struggle with making random tables, this will also be a good book, which is going to give you an awesome starting point, give you a lot of tables to use. It's at that point going to add a lot into your game maybe you didn't think about. Now the cool thing about it is you can use this with other game systems like I do, or use the game as a standalone system, because that is what it is. So let's get into the general oracles. So the general oracles, what they are is it's a yes or no system, just like you would see in Mythic, but instead of using strike ranks and all these other variables that Mythic adds into it, this is a lot more simpler, it's more streamlined, and straight to the point. So the yes, no, it's going to ask you the likelihood, and it goes from almost possible to unlikely to you really don't know, all the way up to it's likely or you're almost certain. And at that point, you'd roll your 20-sider, cross that to your number, and it's going to give you one of 4 outcomes at that point, which will be a solid no, a no, but, a yes, but, and a yes. Now, you may be saying, but. Yeah, no, but. Not B-U-T-T, but B-U-T. And then it has a separate column for the but. And when you roll that, it will, at that point, put a twist on your question. And let's keep this all very random here. Let's roll a 6-sider here and see what we come up with. So, I have rolled a 5. The failure of a piece of gear, either for the hero or an NPC. So depending on the question you're asking, its outcome, it also could relate to that, which is going to, at that point, add more questions and depths into your story. It also addresses how far away is something. And this is really cool because how I talk about using 3D at that point, miniatures and representations on a game board. So at that point you can actually see and judge time and distance for everything, because in solo you really kind of do need that. You really do need a good visual representation for what is going on. This addresses that and asks you some of the questions. It is how far away is a thing for the same place or for the distance of things. So you could always ask the question, you heard a noise at that point coming down the hall. About how far away is it from your character? Well, I'm going to roll a D8. Let's see what it answers. The other side of the room. So, now, from moving on from there, it goes into weather. And if you remember my last video, I talked about wilderness and how I like to use weather in my world at that point to add more into the world, the story. It can either help or hinder my characters. You know, blinding fog or heavy snow, which hampers their movements, all the way down to torrential rains and high winds. It then goes into what they call the oracular adjective and motivations, which is going to add more into your random tables and give you some more options to work with at that point. Goes into actors, relationships, and reactions, which is really cool for NPCs because this helps you at that point generate NPCs, breathe life into them, give them their own motivations and reasons for being there, and make them kind of memorable. So when you write them in your journal and you go back, you can always be like, oh yeah, I remember that person. And it breaks it up into 3 categories: your commoners, your underworld encounters, and your elites and nobles. It goes into reactions for friendly NPCs, NPC strangers, unfriendly NPCs, and common modifiers that at that point could alter some of their reactions. Let's roll up a 12. Oh, it says 2d6 or 12 and see what we get. Let's go with the friendly NPC, shall we? And we roll a 3. The friendly NPC is flat and dismal. He has a -2 for insults or risks to the NPC's wealth or standing. That's pretty cool. So perhaps even though the NPC is quiet and quite boring, he may have a problem for gambling and losing everything that he has. It also moves into memorable traits, goes into ruling temperament, and immediate desires, which all too add more into your NPC, generate them quicker, and at that point gives you more time to enjoy the game and less time writing these things out or creating your own tables for them. Let's roll D100 and see what we come up with. Alright, I got a 40%, so memorable traits. Empathetic speech. But their temperament is very greedy, and their immediate desires is to earn money. Very cool. Very, very cool. Now, aside of NPCs, it goes into urban adventures, and it outlines a sequence of play, how to use scenes, challenges, tactical consequences, and heat, as they call it. It moves into urban adventure plots and crimes, outlining some sample crimes and some crime details. And this is really, really cool because this system can be used not only for, like I said, this system, but also other systems as well. Let's roll a D6 and a D8 to see how we go with this. So, I've rolled on the corruption and dark worship. Now let me roll on the next line for the crime details to see what happens there. The location is an isolated area. The witness is a frightened local. Why there's no action is because that witness refuses to come forward, and it's the only witness, which adds a lot into it, mystery, and so on and so forth. Now it even goes into urban adventure scenes, investigation scenes, conflicts, action scenes, potential foes, and it breaks them up into 4 different categories such as criminals, commoners, officials, and elites. Not limited to urban locations, which is public locations, slum locations, and the elites locations. Fight difficulties, so it's going to add some variables into that, as well as foe statistics. So depending on what you're fighting, vermin, a rabble, a thug, a soldier, a veteran, a brute, sorcerer, a tank, a swarm, or even an elite slayer, it'll give you an outline of a template to use for that. It goes into wilderness adventures. The map, the sequence of play, moving into new hex areas, determining the terrain type, checking for encounters and events, checking for features, adjusting supplies, and resolving encounters. The wilderness terrain and features gives you plenty of tables at that point for terrain types, terrains, or features. Features of details. I mean, they give you a lot here. It goes into wilderness events. So, one of my favorites, weather events. It goes into wet seasons, dry seasons, cold seasons. Even breaks it up by the terrain itself. So you got deserts, you have forests, jungles, plains, hills, mountains, seas, lakes, and swamps. It then moves into dungeon adventures, explaining to you how you entering the dungeon turn, dungeons with goals, dungeons with alarms, and heroic retreats. As well as dungeon types and sizes, and it gives you a lot of tables for that. Common dungeon inhibitants that you should find in there, or you may find in there. Dungeon threat adjustments, dungeon places, loot, and dangers. Location content, encounters found, hazards found, treasures found. And to continue on, it gives you the nature of the feature. So it even outlines when you go into a dungeon room, some of the things that you're going to see. And this is awesome. I love this right here. Inanimate feature quality. Creature motivation. Let's see what a creature's motivation actually will be. I rolled a 2, so kill a boss, cumulative 10% chance in the room of locating. Okay. And it goes into example specific features of a room. So let's see what that has to offer us. A dangerous pet of the inhibitants. Okay, very cool. So if you look at the last table I used, he's planning on killing his boss to gain some loot, and he's probably using a dangerous pet he has in order to carry it out. Dungeon inhibitant details. It goes into their allegiance. And some of these are just really, really awesome tables to use and a great resource. Statistics for unique or unsustained foes. If facing disaster, what will the foes do? Sample monsters' special abilities, combat styles, quirks of a foe, their first round of combat in a fight. This one seems really interesting to me. The first combat round of a fight. Getting back to Pierre's question, something like this can be used to address that. So let me roll a d10 and see what will their first round of action in a fight look like. I got a 4 here. Fall back to a more defensible location. So perhaps they're going to fall back further in the dungeon with more of their comrades in order to, at that point, try to overwhelm your adventurers by numbers. And then the very last page it goes into is it gives you a brief overline of solo play so you can read through it to get a better overall idea. Now those are the tables in the back of the book, and I have used this book extensively for the tables alone, and I have shelved the Mythic at that point just using this. Now where the game is way different, and let me get, some of you may have this book, you already know what I'm talking about. Others of you out there that do not, you know, I know. So I'm going to hold up the character sheet for you to see here. Alright, so you're going to look at that character sheet, specifically focusing on, you got it, the abilities and everything else that you see laid out. And you're going to go, Artichoke, I know that. And I'm even going to show you some of the encounters here. And you're probably going to do the same thing if you're not familiar with the system. Let's hold it up there so you can take a look at the encounter as well. Okay, so I think you got an idea. Now you may already think you know the game. You don't. And to my surprise, when I read through this, I had to figure it out as well. This gives you a whole new combat system and kind of breathes a breath of fresh air into, we'll say, more stagnant systems that have been around for a while. And in doing this, kind of does add some extra element of, how do I put this, surprise, randomness to it, I guess you would say. So we're going to use the example of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Dungeons and Dragons, or basic fantasy, or any of those old school revival games, you're going to roll your 20-sider. You're going to add your bonus, and at that point, if it meets or exceeds the armor class target number, at that point you deal damage to that encounter. Now, for those of you that have played older versions of Dungeons and Dragons, you remember the hit dice. You remember looking at an encounter and it would say HD 4 plus, we'll say 5. So those of us, we knew what that meant is you took your 8-sided dice, you rolled it 4 times, you added that together, then at that point added the 5 to it, and that was the hit points of that encounter. This does not work that way. How it works is you roll a 20-sided die. Now, of course, a 1 is an automatic miss, a 20 is automatic hit. But you roll a 20-sided die, you add the encounter's armor class number to the number rolled, plus any bonuses you have. If it equals 20 or higher, at that point, you've hit the encounter. Now you would roll your damage corresponding to the weapons that you use and the dice, subtracting the number from the hit die. So a real good example I'm going to have here is this Hungry Ghost. This Hungry Ghost has a hit die of 1. So if you are using the short sword, that's a 1d6, and you roll a 2, there's no question. Done. It's off the board. But if you're dealing with this leaping vampire, it's got a hit die of 7 to 9. So you can see where it has its checks and balances. The combat matrices are unique to the game system. And now, with that in mind, me personally, I enjoy all the, at that point, tables and everything in the back, and that's what I use a lot. The game itself, this may be something, maybe in the future I will play a game with it, but personally honest with you, I enjoy RuneQuest and Palladium and the older versions of D&D, and I just really like all the tables and everything it has to offer in the back of the book. Either way you look at it, this is a wealth of information. Now, what I see a lot, particularly with comments, is people saying, hey, I used to play RPGs and now I'm getting back into it and don't know where to start, or hey, I'm just now getting into the hobby, I don't know where to start, what do I get, how do I get started, all those questions. This system is a complete system unto itself. This is all you need, this book and a set of polyhedral dice, and you can be gaming, which is beautiful. It's awesome. Unlike a lot of other RPG systems out there, to where you have to buy upwards to 3 main core rule books, read the books, understand the books, and then at that point make the necessary adjustments for solo play for them to work for you. This right here not only gives you a complete game system, outlines character creation, how to use that, combat, encounters, but also gives you an in-game coach of solo RPG gaming and how to do that. This right here, my friends, I would have to say for 2019 so far, in my review of a game system for solo tabletop use, this is a 10 out of a 10. And I have to say, hats off to Kevin Crawford for coming out with this. You've done very well, sir, and it's an excellent game system. moving forward, a lot of you out there, if you're struggling with some game systems that you may have, this may not be a bad investment for you, because at that point, you have everything you need here, and a lot of the stuff that I talk about on my channel with random tables and random weather events and terrain features and everything else like that is outlined in this book. Whew, so we got that out of the way. And I can't say that is an awesome, awesome system. Next thing I want to talk about, and I've done an unboxing of it before I end this video. Haven't used it yet. It's something I have just picked up. Now, if you remember, I did a review of the board game Fallout. I loved it. It was awesome. Plays like a role-playing game. Gives you a lot of options, questions, avenues that, at that point, even for the solo player, just moves the story forward. Always kind of keeping you in suspense at that point, because certain actions that you take unknowingly at that point may help the other faction or the rival faction, depending on how you look at it, if you decide to join a faction or not, against the other one, which that is, how do I put this, the premise of the game. You got two factions warring against one another. You're a survivor in a post-apocalyptic world. You have these horrible mutated creatures trying to kill you. All the time you're trying to survive, go through ruins, settlements, complete quests, and hoping that you're making the right decision, because the wrong decision at that point, well, could give your enemy the upper hand. Awesome system, by the way, guys. But anyways, what I had picked up, and I plan on getting into later, is this one, Fallout, the expansion, the New California. So let's take a look inside and see what comes with it. And if you decide to get Fallout, maybe you have not, or perhaps you have Fallout and you're on the fence whether to get the expansion or not. Let's take a look inside. So as you can see, I haven't even opened the plastic on these yet. They're all still sealed. It comes with more terrain tiles, and of course you get more tokens for the game, and that's always good, expanding the map and giving you more options. Also comes with more weapons and scenario cards to add to your already decks, and at that point to expand the game, hence the name expansion, and to give you more. The other cool thing is your scenario cards, and these are always very interesting. And if you remember, when I did the live stream of this, yeah, it gives you a lot of new scenarios in here. Sorry, it's the first time I'm actually looking at them. It's cool. So, of course, it gives you a brief outline of your scenario, your enemies, but it also gives you a time tracker of your factions that you put your tokens on to keep track of. And you hope that your faction is the one that wins the game, and not your rival faction. Last but not least, you get more cards to add into, of course, for settlements, ruins, and more at that point, as I want to put it, story dialogue cards, because that's really what they are. You go in there and you make a decision and you flip to this next card to get an answer, move on, and so on and so forth. Last but not least, if you're like me, which I'm sure a lot of you are out there, you get a lot more highly detailed, you guessed it, my friends, miniatures. And you get 5 new miniatures at that point to put into the game system on the board to use, giving you a lot more options and replayability. That guy's pretty cool, I have to admit. Let's go into this one. He's, yeah, he looks like he's pretty heavily armored, carries a pretty wicked looking gun. He doesn't look like somebody you really want to cross paths with. And of course, last but not least, you get her. And even though she looks innocent enough, I bet she's probably onto herself, I should say, a force to be trifled with. So, that's what you get with the expansion set, and I'm going to open this up later and get into it and play some Fallout. Or maybe Massive Darkness, or maybe some of my other games that I have over here. I'm going to play something. Don't know yet. But, anyways, guys, I think 2019 is going to be a good year. I hope it's going to be a good year, and I hope my channel at this point grows more and expands more. And I look forward to reading more of your awesome comments and, you know, moving on from there. So, I think that'll do it for this video, guys. And if you liked my video, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Click the bell icon for notifications. And I think as far as that goes, that's where I'm going to end this video. And at that point, I think I'm going to go scrounge for something to eat and get into some gaming. Happy New Year, my fellow solo enthusiast. Game on, and I hope 2019 may bring you more games, more treasure, and more fortunes. Alright, till next time, guys. Talk to you later.